You can download this template of a methodology chapter and the PowerPoint slides just below this video in the description box. Welcome to the second session of the Dissertation Club. This session will explore ways to write your methodology chapter. Please check out the channel for more videos on writing a dissertation. Is the methodology written in the past, present, or future tense? Yes, the methodology is written in the past tense. Imagine that you have already completed your study. You are reporting back to your colleagues the steps that you took to complete your study. So it is written in the past tense. In this session, I will present two ways to write your methodology. Number one, you can build a methodology from scratch. You can build it from the ground up. I'll give you a step-by-step template to build the methodology. Or number two, if you do not want to build a methodology, you can steal a methodology. I will show you the steps to correctly steal a methodology. You will have to follow these steps or you'll get yourself in trouble. We will now explain how to build a methodology from scratch. This is a typical layout of a methodology. I have highlighted the research paradigm section in red because many of you may not need to do this section. You should check with your supervisor. So the first section in your methodology chapter is an introduction paragraph. You should try to start every chapter of your dissertation with a mini introduction like this. State the central aim of the methodology chapter. Connect your research aim with this methodology chapter. And lastly, at the end of this paragraph, explain how your methodology is organized. After the introduction paragraph is the research paradigm section. What is a research paradigm or a research philosophy? Sometimes the terms research paradigm and research philosophy are used interchangeably. A research paradigm is a world view about how we conduct our research. A research paradigm embodies an ontology, epistemology, and methodology. Once you choose a research paradigm, you have committed yourself to a specific ontology, epistemology, and methodology because all these things are wrapped up in the research paradigm. The ontology, epistemology, and methodology are very difficult to understand. It seems that there are a million definitions, and some of these definitions are vague and difficult to relate to. I find them easier to understand in question form. We start with our ontology in red. Our ontology is about our being. Who are you? What is your role? These are ontological questions. Moving on to purple. How do you know what is true? How can you verify truth? Are you seeing the world as it truly is? All these are epistemological questions. Moving on to green. A methodology is a concrete system that you can put in place to reveal this truth. I will now try to relate the concepts of ontology, epistemology, and methodology to your research. The easiest way to do this is to look at two opposing research paradigms, the positivist paradigm and the critical paradigm. These two paradigms are completely opposite. At one end of the spectrum is the positivist paradigm, and at the other end of the spectrum is the critical paradigm. Most other research paradigms exist between both of these extremes. So the ontology of the positivist is that he is a scientist. That is who he is. That is his being. It is his duty as a scientist to observe one reality that we are all subject to. This is his ontology. The only way this positivist can reveal this one reality is to be as objective as possible. Only objectivity will lead him to the truth. Only objectivity will show him what is true and what is false. He believes that quantitative and numerical approaches are the most objective. So this is the path that he takes. This is his epistemology. So he uses a detached and numerical methodology. He needs this methodology because it is detached. This detachment will increase his objectivity to get closer to this one reality that we are all subject to. He believes that women lie, men lie, but numbers do not lie. Numbers are objective. Numbers will take him to the truth. So this is the methodology of the positivist. At the other end of the spectrum is the critical paradigm. The ontology of the critical theorist is that he is an imperfect human being. He is not a detached scientist. He is just a human being trying to figure things out. He is just a human being that is researching many realities. Many realities. These realities are fluid and impacted by the forces of race, gender, culture, power, etc. It is difficult to get close to these realities because these realities are always moving and they are impacted by many forces. So, the way he gets to know these realities is by revealing the context of the situation. He must know the context, not just the subject, but the context that the subject is in. Context is everything. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything is relative. Everything is connected. So he must be connected to the research to find the truth. So the system that he puts in place to understand the situation, it must be connected. It must be involved. It must be participation focused, qualitative. It must be qualitative. This is his methodology. We see the problems of divergent ontologies and epistemologies in our daily lives all the time. Last year, this radio host, James O'Brien, wanted to objectively look at the actions of the police's role in the child Q case. He wanted to isolate the police's role, just like a scientist would isolate something in a test tube. Even though he believed that other factors were important, just for that day, he wanted to focus on the police's role. Then a caller called into James's show and said that you cannot separate the police's actions from the school's actions. You cannot separate the education system from law and enforcement. Context is everything. There is an intimate relationship between the school and the prison. If we isolate the police, we only get a distorted picture. So who was the positivist and who was the critical theorist? So sometimes we disagree on a subject, but it's not really the subject that we disagree on. We may have opposing ontologies and epistemologies that are beneath the surface. James wanted to know the truth by the scientific method, but the caller wanted to know the truth by immersing herself in the context. So in this picture, their ontological positions are opposing each other. So one character sees it as a W, but the other character in a different position sees it as an M. So they are disagreeing. M, W, M, W. It seems that they are arguing over letters. It's not about the letters. It is their point of view. You have to go back to their point of view. You have to go back to their ontology. So before I look at your findings, I need to know your point of view. I need to know your ontological basis. I need to know why you believe what you believe, your epistemology. If not, we'll be arguing about your findings, arguing about your analysis, but they are not the issue. The issue lies with your perspective, your ontology, and what will convince you of the truth, your epistemology. I think this is best represented in this diagram. When we read a research paper, we only see the surface, the methods and methodology, but you need to go deeper and look at the epistemology of that research article and the ontology of that article, and that will show you their true position. Thankfully, you do not have to engage in these debates. You do not have to mention ontology or epistemology at great lengths. Maybe just a sentence or two. Maybe not even that, because we have ready-made research paradigms, ready to be used and applied. Scholars have done the work for us and created these research paradigms. All you have to do is choose your flavor. Choose whichever paradigm suits your dissertation. You can take a research paradigm off the shelf. It contains all the necessary ingredients of ontology, epistemology, and methodology. For example, you do not have to speak at great lengths on the ontology of critical realism or speak about the epistemology of critical realism. By you selecting the critical realism paradigm by itself, you have already chosen all three of your ologies. All three are wrapped together in this paradigm. So you don't need to speak individually about ontology, epistemology, methodology, because all three of these things are wrapped up with the critical realist standpoint. So after your introduction paragraph, you should briefly explain about your research paradigm. You should start this section by defining the research paradigm, explain the assumptions of the research paradigm. Now you need to be more specific. Justify this research paradigm. Justify why you are using this research paradigm. How will the research paradigm help you achieve your research aim? Be very specific now. How will it help you answer your research questions? This is where you get the critical analysis marks. You may choose the paradigm because it's very prominent in the literature. It's the dominant perspective within the literature that you are reading. Within the area of study, within your topic area, you have found that there's a particular approach or a particular paradigm which is used the most. It's the most widely used in the literature. So you are merely following this tradition. You are following on from what people did before you. Or the opposite. The paradigm is not prominent in the literature. For instance, the critical realist approach has rarely been used. So by you using the critical realist approach, you can provide additional insight. Or perhaps you have seen this paradigm used effectively in a similar study. You have seen a journal article which covers generally the same area as your dissertation, and you saw how the approach was used. So you believe you can also get success from this approach because of how it was used in a similar study. Or perhaps this approach offers you a complete package. It completes your research. The interpretivist approach offered the researcher a lens for understanding our being in the world. Now, 2.2. So after you've discussed your research paradigm, you want to move on to your research design. Explain and justify your qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods approach. And if you are adopting a mixed methods approach, you need to justify your approach. If you are using surveys and interviews, you need to justify why you are mixing these methods. Surveys is from a particular tradition, and interviews is from an opposing tradition. So if you are using these two approaches, these two methods, you need to explain why you are mixing methods. You need to justify why you are mixing methods. You need to explain clearly how mixing methods will help you answer your research, how mixing methods will give you additional insight. You need to explain this. Also, you need to explain and justify your deductive approach, or explain and justify your inductive approach. Whichever approach you take, you need to explain and justify. The key word throughout this methodology is justification. Once you explain what you did, you need to justify what you did. After the research design, you need to think about your participants. How will you gain participants for your study? Which sampling method will you use? Will you use convenient sampling, snowball sampling, or random sampling? Which sampling method will you use? So in 2.3, you should describe your participants, explain how you selected the participants, justify the size of your sample, and justify why you selected that particular sampling approach. Especially if you have a small sample size, you need to justify that small sample size. You can't say, I couldn't find anybody. You need to put a good reason of why your sample size is so small. Or if you have a particularly large sample size or even a medium sample size, it's always good to justify why your sample is that particular size. Also justify which sampling approach you selected. Did you choose snowball, random, convenience? Which sampling approach did you select? Explain how you applied the sampling approach. Was there a limitation or a hurdle with this sampling approach? This will get you critical analysis marks. Think about the limitations or hurdles or struggles or tensions that you had with your sampling approach. And if you did encounter any of these, how did you remedy the limitation? This is great for gaining critical analysis marks. After you discuss your participants, then you need to write a methods section. Define your methods. Which method did you choose? Interviews, surveys, focus groups. Which method did you choose? Define your method. Justify why you selected that particular method. Explain how you applied the method. Was there a limitation or a hurdle with this method? If yes, how did you remedy the limitation? A great place to get information for your methods is by using Google Books. So if you want to know about the advantages of a particular method, type advantages and the method that you want to know about, and Google Books will direct you to books that talk about this. It will only give you the preview, but sometimes all you need is that preview. That should be sufficient for you. And the good thing about finding the advantages about this particular method, you can use it as your rationale or when you justify why you chose semi-structured interviews or why you chose surveys or questionnaires. As well, if you want to find out about the limitations to a particular approach, search disadvantages and the method. So in this situation, the student wanted to know the disadvantages of survey questions. So they put this into the search bar to find these disadvantages. And as well, if you want to know how a method is used within a research paradigm, type in the research paradigm and the method. So in this situation, a student wanted to know how interview questions are developed by social constructionists. So she typed this in to the search engine. And also, if you're a post-positivist and you want to know how to develop survey questions, type that into the search bar and see what comes up. And this is a way to show critical planning and forethought when you're developing your interview questions or your survey questions. So make a note of your research questions and show how the interview questions are derived from your research questions. So in this chart, you're showing a relationship between your initial research question and the interview questions that came out of that. You're showing that relationship. So your research question number 2, and you're showing the interview questions that came out of that. I've included the link to this figure. This is actually taken from a textbook. So just below this video, you have access to the PowerPoint slides. In the PowerPoint slides, you'll be able to download these slides and it will take you to the original source. So just to show the connection between your research questions and how you formulated your interview questions, you can include this in your method or within your appendix section. And if you do not have research questions, but you have research objectives, you can state your research objective and show how you developed your interview questions. All of these interview questions came out of these research objectives. You're showing that relationship. And once again, your second research objective and all of these interview questions came out of that. And I have a link to the 9 types of interview questions. Always good to think about how you interview and the manner that you interview and show your methodology of interviewing people as well. It's always good to sketch this out. It shows critical thought and forethought. And once again, I have the link to this figure 3.1 in this document. Data analysis 3.5, explain how you analyze the data. Justify why you selected this type of analysis. And state if there was a limitation or a hurdle with this analysis approach. If yes, how did you remedy the limitation? Ethical considerations. If you are using live participants, live subjects, here are a number of ethical considerations to think about. But if you are using no participants, here are some ethical considerations to think about. And just to end now with the conclusion section, summarize the chapter, summarize the methodology chapter. Here's an example. And take the reader to the next chapter, escort the reader to this next chapter. You should always try to end every section of your dissertation with a mini conclusion like this. Summarize what you have done and escort the reader to the next chapter. We will now discuss the second option of developing a methodology. You can steal a methodology. I know it sounds controversial, but it is not. Rather than reinventing the wheel, you try to perfect what is already there. You take a methodology from a publication and adapt that methodology to suit the needs of your dissertation. What are the benefits of stealing a methodology? It gives you structure. It gives you a blueprint. If you are unsure about what to include, you can use it as a guide. This gives you a shield from criticism. The methodology that you stole has been peer reviewed and checked by other scholars. Also, you can see the results that this methodology produced. By adapting the methodology, you have connected your dissertation with the knowledge field. The way your methodology is structured and articulated is in line with the literature. You have drawn inspiration from the literature. Stealing is the best way to understand methodologies. As I said before, me personally, I find it difficult to understand methodologies from generic research books. I need to see it applied in the study. I need to adapt it myself. I need to play around with it myself. Stealing is a way to do this. And the most important reason, it gives you a critical foundation. What I mean by this is when you steal a methodology, you have to adapt it to your study. This process of adaptation is a critical activity. Adding to this methodology, taking something away from this methodology are critical activities. So, where should you steal the methodology from? There are two places that I recommend. The first place to steal a methodology is from a journal article. One of the best places to find journal articles is your university library catalogue. Search for an article that resembles your dissertation topic. For instance, if your dissertation topic is about gender inequality in the advertising industry, type in the keywords gender advertising industry. Pick an article that broadly looks at your topic area, then adapt the methodology of that article to suit your dissertation. Number 2, the best place to steal, bar none, is Ethos. Ethos is a repository for PhD and master dissertations. Search Ethos for a PhD or a master dissertation that is in the same area as your dissertation topic. I prefer PhD to journal articles because PhD methodologies are typically longer. Some journal article methodologies are just 1 or 2 paragraphs. Also, you can use Ethos to search for your supervisor's methodology in their PhD. Most PhDs completed in the UK will be stored by Ethos. Does anyone know where else to get methodologies from? If so, leave your comments in the chat section. When you steal a methodology from a journal article or a PhD thesis, you must do 4 things or you'll get yourself in trouble. Number 1, paraphrase and reference key sections of the methodology. Acknowledge the source. This is very important. Explain that the methodology was derived from or adapted from that particular study. Do not copy the whole study word for word. Do not copy the whole methodology word for word. Make sure that you only paraphrase the key sections, not everything. State why you selected the methodology. This is very important. You must justify your adaptation of someone else's methodology because you could have developed your own methodology or you could have adapted another methodology, but you chose that specific methodology. Why did you choose that particular methodology? And when you explain why you selected the methodology, you are demonstrating critical analysis because you have to explain why a particular methodology is exceptional. Why did this particular methodology stand out? This is critical analysis. Critical analysis is not just about mentioning negative points, it's also about mentioning positive points. Another way of demonstrating critical analysis is to mention that a particular methodology had an excellent approach, but it is missing a crucial component. And your study has come along to add that crucial component. You are pointing out a problem in their methodology, then putting forward a solution. Your adaptation of their methodology is the solution. Number 3. This is another way of demonstrating critical analysis. Here you explain what was discarded from the methodology, explain why you discarded it. Do not just steal an entire methodology. You have to trim it. You have to adapt it. You have to show some alterations. At some point in your methodology, you should explain what and why you discarded aspects of a methodology. Be very explicit. Be very explicit. At some point in your methodology, you should explain what and why you discarded aspects of a methodology. You can discard parts of the stolen methodology because they were not relevant to your study. Make sure to explain why they were not relevant to your study. Or you can discard parts of the stolen methodology because you believe that they were ineffective. Be sure to explain why you believe they were ineffective. Finally, number 4, This is another way to demonstrate critical analysis. Explain what you added to the methodology to serve your dissertation. Explain why you added it. Throughout your methodology, make explicit what you added to the stolen methodology. Be explicit about what you added, and also mention the benefits of adding sections to the stolen methodology. This is essentially what you are doing. You are trimming the bush. You are trimming the hedge. You are not just taking the hedge as it is, but you adding and discarding and explaining why you selected the methodology. You are trimming the hedge. This is critical analysis. Here is an example of points 1 and 2. You can insert point 1 and 2 in the introduction chapter of your methodology chapter. Most chapters in your dissertation should begin with a small introduction chapter. All you need is just a few sentences that introduces the chapter to the reader. So point 1, reference the methodology, and point number 2, state why you selected the methodology. These points appear in the introduction paragraph of the methodology chapter, like this example. Number 3, explain what was discarded from the stolen methodology. Explain why you discarded this particular aspect. I've put this point in the sampling section of the methodology, but you can put it where you see fit. Number 4, explain what you added to the methodology. I've put this point in the ethics section, but you can put it where you see fit. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. So, are you a thief or are you a builder? As a student said in the class today, you can combine both. Are you a thief or a builder? Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.